Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, let me share a tale about promises, patience, and a surprising prince. The Frog Prince is a story of transformation, not just in form, but in heart. So, settle in, relax, breathe, and listen closely. The Frog Prince, an adaptation of the fairy tale collected by the Brothers Grimm as a short story to relax to, and read by me, John Donaldson. Once upon a time, in a peaceful kingdom surrounded by dark woods and green fields, there lived a young princess. She was the youngest daughter of the king, and the loveliest of them all. Her beauty was known across the land. But even more than her golden hair, her bright eyes, or her graceful way of moving, people admired her playful spirit. She often wandered through the palace gardens, where tall trees offered shade from the midday sun, singing to birds and tossing a golden ball high into the air and catching it with joyful laughter. Her garden walks were like small adventures. She would skip along stone paths, her golden ball flying high with each throw, the sun reflecting off its surface in dazzling flashes. Sometimes she would stop to watch butterflies dance above the fountains, or speak softly to a squirrel perched in a fig tree. One warm afternoon, the air thick with the scent of summer, the princess wandered farther than usual. She followed a narrow path through the woods, deeper than she had ever dared to go alone. Eventually, she reached a deep, cool well hidden in a quiet clearing. The stone rim was old and covered in moss, and water shimmered far below, still and dark like a mirror. She sat at the edge, tossing her golden ball high into the air again and again. This ball was very precious to her, a gift from her father on her birthday, and she guarded it more carefully than any of her other possessions. However, her sense of caution was sometimes overshadowed by her playful spirit. One day, while she was throwing the golden ball higher than usual, it slipped through her fingers. She let out a cry and lunged for it, but it bounced once on the stone wall and then disappeared into the well with a soft splash far below. She leaned over, her heart sinking, trying to see where it had gone, but the well was far too deep, and all she could see was her own reflection staring back up at her. She felt immediate sorrow as she realized that she might never see her beloved toy again. Frustrated and sad, she sank to her knees on the soft grass and began to cry, her tears falling just as quickly as the golden ball had. Her soft sobs filled the still air, the sound delicate and lonely. Just then she heard a strange voice. It was rough, croaky, and came from nearby. A frog, green and damp with shiny skin, had appeared on the edge of the well. Its wide eyes blinked slowly, and it tilted its head as it asked her why she was crying. Startled, the princess looked down into those two curious, bulging eyes staring up at her, and blinked in surprise. She had never seen a talking animal before, and hesitated. Unsure if she should trust such a strange creature, she explained through her sniffles that her favourite toy, her beloved golden ball, had fallen into the water far below. She insisted that no treasure in the world mattered more to her. The frog listened quietly, and then made her an offer. It said it could help her. He would dive to the bottom of the well and bring the ball back. However, he added that he would do this only if she would promise something in return. The frog didn't want treasure or food. It only asked to be her companion. Once she became his friend, she would share not only her friendship, but also her life at the palace. The frog explained that he wished to sit at her table, eat from her plate, drink from her cup, and sleep on her pillow. The princess, still thinking this was a strange dream or even a joke, quickly promised him anything he wanted. She did not really believe a frog would want to leave the well in the first place, or that it could truly live in the palace. She assumed she could say yes to his demands, and then do as she pleased once she had her ball back. All she wanted was her ball. With a cheerful croak, the frog dove into the water. Bubbles rose to the surface, and for a long moment there was silence. The princess leaned forward, holding her breath. After a few moments, the frog came to the surface, pushing the golden ball out of the depths with its nose. The princess clapped with joy, took the ball in her hands, and ran off toward the castle without a word of thanks, leaving the frog alone behind. The frog called after her with hope in his voice, reminding her of the promise she had made, but she paid no heed to his croaking voice. That evening, the royal family gathered in the great hall for dinner. The long table gleamed under the light of many candles, and the smell of roasted meats and sweet honey filled the air. Servants moved quietly between the guests, pouring wine and offering plates of fruit and bread. The princess sat beside her father, smiling and speaking with ease, her golden ball safely placed beside her on the velvet cushion of her chair. But just as she lifted her cup to her lips, a strange noise echoed through the marble corridors. It was faint at first, like water dripping, but then it became clearer, a croaking voice, steady and determined, calling out her name and repeating her promise. The princess froze. Her hand stopped in mid-air, and the smile fell from her face. She had not thought the frog would come. She had not thought he could. The sound of wet feet against stone echoed louder and louder, until finally a knock came at the great hall's doors. The king, noticing his daughter's fear, asked gently what troubled her. With a red face and a trembling voice, she told him everything: the lost ball, the frog's help, and the silly promise she had made. Her father listened carefully. He did not laugh, nor did he scold. Instead, he reminded her that a promise once given must be kept. whether made to a king, a peasant, or a frog, one's word was a treasure to honor. With a solemn nod, he ordered the doors to be opened. The frog entered the hall, each step leaving behind a small wet print. He moved with purpose, hopping past polished boots and glittering gowns until he reached the princess's chair. Looking up at her with calm eyes, he reminded her of their agreement. The princess's stomach twisted. She wanted to disappear, but with a deep breath she lifted the frog carefully and placed him on the edge of her golden plate. Servants and nobles looked on in silence, unsure whether to be amused or horrified. The frog ate with short gulps, taking small sips from her glass when she offered it. Then, when the meal was done, he spoke again. He asked the princess to take him to her room, for he wished to rest. The princess hesitated, her heart pounding. The thought of sharing her room, her pillow, with a cold, damp frog made her skin crawl. But the king's eyes reminded her, a promise is a promise. Reluctantly, she carried the frog up the wide staircase, handling him with 2 fingers as though she held something slimy and repulsive, and entered her chamber in silence. Inside her bedroom, the lanterns flickered gently, casting long shadows across the walls. The curtains swayed slightly in the evening breeze, and the scent of lavender drifted through the open window from the gardens below. Her bed, tall and draped with heavy gold and cream fabric, stood like a quiet ship, waiting to set sail across a sea of dreams. The frog rested quietly on a silk cushion near the head of the bed, his wide, unblinking eyes fixed on her face. His green skin glistened in the warm light, and his tiny legs and arms were still. The princess stood frozen near the doorway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her thoughts were tangled. Shame, discomfort, confusion, all twisted together. The room, once filled with soft colours and calm light, now felt different, as though she were a guest in her own space. The frog spoke once more in his deep, croaky voice, reminding her gently of the promise that she had made. At that moment, her frustration rose. Her hands shook. She could not imagine how a cold, damp frog might share her private space. With trembling fingers, she picked him up and shouted that she had done enough, that she was tired of strange magic and strange demands. With a burst of anger, she threw him toward the wall. In that very moment, a mysterious transformation occurred. Before the frog could hit the floor, a sudden glow filled the room like a burst of sunlight. The air shimmered, and the lantern flames leaned outward as if touched by a strong wind. Then, where the frog had been, there was a young, handsome prince, blinking in surprise at the sudden shift in shape. He was tall, graceful, and dressed in deep velvet with gold trim. His hair shone in the light, and his eyes held a calm, grateful expression. The princess stepped back in astonishment, her hands flying to her mouth. Her heart raced as she struggled to believe what she saw. The prince, in a gentle voice, explained that he had once ruled a distant kingdom, but an evil witch had cast him into this animal form. He had wandered far and wide, finding no one willing to help him, until, at last, the princess had given her promise at the well. Even though her motivation had initially been selfish, it had led them to meet. Only by winning the companionship of a princess who was honest in her acceptance of him, even if she was reluctant, could the spell be broken and he be set free. Though her kindness had not been perfect, it had been enough. The moment she fully acknowledged him, the enchantment had dissolved. He bowed slightly as he thanked her for her part in lifting the spell. She stood in silence, her thoughts now softer, as a sense of wonder bloomed in her chest. Though she was embarrassed by her earlier behavior, she was also moved by his tale. By now it was late in the evening, but the prince suggested that they should go to his father's land the following day, if the king gave his permission, that is. While the princess felt uncertain, her father believed it would be wise for her to accompany this newly revealed prince. After all, she had played a part in breaking his enchantment, and the king wished to see how fate would guide this unusual friendship. The next morning, a strange coincidence took place. As the pale light of dawn spilled over the palace rooftops, a grand carriage rolled slowly through the palace gates. Its polished sides reflected the soft glow of the morning sun, and the wheels made only the quietest sound on the cobbled path. 8 white horses, proud in posture, stood harnessed to the front. Their manes were carefully braided with silver thread, and their hooves struck the stones with steady rhythm. Inside the carriage sat a man dressed in dark blue. His coat was embroidered at the cuffs, though it was worn with age. His shoulders were broad, but they were pulled in with the weight of deep emotion. His name was Iron Henry, and he was more than just a servant. He had been the prince's most trusted friend, a guardian of his story, and the only one who had never stopped believing in his return. When the prince had vanished, taken by the curse, Henry had feared his own heart would break from sadness. The pain had felt so great, so heavy, that he had ordered the royal blacksmith to create 3 strong iron bands, which he wrapped around his chest to keep his heart from falling apart. For many years those bands had remained, pressing against his ribs like the burden of hope, and he had wandered the lands in search of his lost prince. Now, as the prince stepped into the sunlight, alive, smiling, and standing hand in hand with a beautiful princess, Henry fell to his knees. His eyes filled with tears, and his chest lifted with a great breath of joy. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed throughout the courtyard, followed by another, and then a third. The iron bands, no longer needed, snapped one by one, not from pain, but from happiness so strong that even metal could not contain it. The prince and princess climbed into the carriage together, their hands still gently intertwined. The princess glanced back at her father, who stood waving from the palace steps. She found herself both nervous and excited to discover the prince's kingdom. The wheels began to turn, and a new journey began. At the front, Iron Henry sat tall, holding the reins with a steady hand. His heart, once held by iron, was now full of light and peace. As the road stretched out before them, it felt not like a return, but the beginning of something new. Eventually, they arrived at the gates of the prince's family castle. It was a grand structure, with towers that gleamed under the sun and a drawbridge spanning a wide moat. Courtiers rushed out to greet the returning heir, both delighted and shocked by his sudden appearance. News spread rapidly inside the castle walls, and soon the entire court assembled to welcome him back. When the princess and the prince entered the great hall, the gathered crowd applauded. They had never imagined such a wondrous day would come. Then the prince knelt before the princess in front of the entire court and declared that his heart belonged to her, for she had unwittingly freed him from his curse. The princess, who had initially seen him only as an annoying frog, now realized how her promise had shaped both their destinies. The aging king took the princess's hand and thanked her for what she had done. He invited her to remain in his kingdom, suggesting that she would make a fine partner for her son if she so wished. Although slightly overwhelmed, the princess agreed. In later years, the frog-turned-prince proved to be a kind and capable king, relying often on Iron Henry's counsel. Over time, the princess showed herself to be filled with compassion, having learned not only the importance of her word, but also the value of looking past illusions to the true essence beneath. The end. And so, dear listener, the frog became a prince once more, and a promise, however small, led to something greater than anyone had expected. This tale reminds us that patience, honesty, and kindness have the power to break even the strongest spell. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until we meet again, may your heart remain open, your promises true, and your stories full of wonder.